I'm Sterling Ford, and you're listening to Futurism Radio. On today's show is a Cory Doctorow speech I ripped off a video from Donway.org. That's DANWEI.org. Last week, Cory was in Beijing, where he spoke to a crowded bookstore audience about copyright and futurism. So keep on listening, because it's good stuff. For those neophytes who don't know that Cory Doctorow is one of the editors of Boing Boing, a brilliant sci-fi writer, and an all-round hero for the new millennium, it's only 7 years in. I can still use new. Here is Cory Doctorow.
This speech has a title. It might be Futurism Sucks. I gave a talk on this subject a little while ago at a Foo Camp, one of the O'Reilly conferences in Silicon Valley, and they seem to like the title. Futurists, back in the 70s and maybe even a little earlier if they were particularly prescient, started talking about the information economy and the coming information revolution. And they had a nice catchy title, which I think is a prerequisite if you're going to do effective futurism. You need a good catchy title, and they had that in information economy. But they were shy on details. No one really knew what what information economy meant. But a lot of people assume that it must mean buying and selling information, which of course means restricting the flow of information, because you can't have an effective market unless you have property, and you can't have property unless you can exclude people. You can't buy and sell soybean futures if anyone can walk into the future soybean crop and walk away with them, regardless of whether or not they've paid for the soybean futures. So in order to have a market, you have to have the ability to exclude people, and that, in the case of information, means the ability to limit people and in their copying of information, knowledge goods. And this implies, of course, that the information economy and the information society will be a society in which there are fewer copying machines, which is to say computers, and fewer copying systems, which is to say networks, and that they will work less well, and that they'll be slower, and that they'll be harder to get access to, and fewer people will know how to use them, and that they'll be less efficient. And this turned out to be wrong. I think today we can see that an information society is one in which we have more computers, more networks, where computers and networks get faster, where more people know how to use them, and it's challenging what we know about the information society and about the information economy. And this is bad news because, of course, many of the world's economies are retooling to be based on information. So to give you some examples about the futility of controlling copying and controlling the spread of information in the 21st century as we get more IT, I thought I'd pick a couple of my favorite whipping boys. The first one is something that we call digital rights management, or depending on who you're talking to, digital restriction management. It sometimes trades under the name copy protection. I used to be a systems administrator, and this offends me because I never protected information by not copying it. The way systems administrators protect information is by making lots of copies of it. Jared Lanier, the inventor of virtual reality, once proposed that you could really protect information by encoding it in cockroach DNA, because there'd be trillions of copies and they'd survive even a nuclear war. You know, I think the best term for this is probably copy prevention or use control software. And the pitch for it has rarely been, we will stop people from making copies, because unless you're pitching to really ignorant people who haven't been paying attention, this pitch doesn't have a lot of credibility, because we know that these systems fall like dominoes. You know, that an industry will spend 5 years and $10 billion inventing an anti-copying system, and a teenager in Norway will break it for breakfast. You know, recently, a guy who calls himself Mueslick64, so he named himself after cereal. He first broke HD DVD, and that was pretty impressive. It hadn't been out for very long, but he owned an HD DVD system, so he had lots of access to it, so he was able to break it. But then he went on to break Blu-ray without ever actually seeing or holding a Blu-ray player. He broke it purely like just by looking at information that he could get about Blu-ray over the internet. He didn't actually need to ever touch one, like Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother Mycroft, who could solve mysteries without ever leaving the apartment. You know, he had this over Sherlock. So the pitch has not been, we'll stop people from making copies. The pitch has been, we'll stop everyone except Norwegian teenagers and hackers who name themselves after breakfast cereal from making copies. And since most people aren't teenagers, and most people aren't And most people who we care about aren't poor, because the other people who will go to the great lengths to make copies are poor people for whom trading time for money makes a lot of sense. You can trade a lot of time invested in figuring out how to break the copy protection or copy prevention because you don't get a lot of money, and it's cheaper for you to spend your time doing this than to spend your money buying legitimate copy. But most of the people that we care about aren't poor, they aren't students, they aren't hackers. They're like average people sitting in their living rooms, 18 to 34, who spend a lot of money on media. And those people don't know how to do this, and they never will learn how to do it, and so we're safe. But of course, every time one of those theoretical, mythical, average consumers, and this is really terrible, but the examples are always people's mothers or grandmothers. So my grandmother, she types 120 words a minute and has a computer, and she sends me email. My mother has a PhD, so they're bad examples. My grandfather, on the other hand, was he was a watchmaker, and he never mastered anything digital. So my grandfather will never learn how to use these technologies. But every day we connect more people like my grandfather to the internet. Every day we teach more people like my grandfather about general purpose search tools like Google. And today, you don't need to be a super hacker with a name derived from breakfast cereal to get a copy of a movie that doesn't have any DRM on it. What you need to do is know how to go to Google and type in Harry Potter, download, torrent, right? And up it comes, right? So it turns out that the more IT you have, that is to say the faster that networks are, the more ubiquitous they are, the more people we hook up to PCs and so on. And of course, the governments of the world are spending fortunes to hook their citizens up to the internet. And every company in the world is in a race to deliver a cheaper PC. You have one laptop per child that's going to sell a $150, $100 laptop starting in a few months, and so on. Every time we do this DRM pitch becomes less effective. But what actually happens is that every time you deliver DRM-restricted media to someone who was naive or law-abiding or whatever adjective you want to apply to them enough to go out and spend money instead of stealing it, that person rapidly runs up against the limits of the anti-copying software. So for example, if you bought a Google video from Google Video, they last month turned off the Google Video server, so now your Google videos don't play anymore. And they initially wrote everyone an email saying, tomorrow your videos stop working, but here's a credit. You can buy things with Google checkout money if you want to go to a store that sells Google checkout things. Not videos, because you can't buy those videos anymore, but other stuff. If you decided that you were tired of owning TV shows and you wanted to use your money to buy groceries, here's the money you spend on the TV show to get groceries. So imagine you came home one day and the man who used to own Tower Records, it's bankrupt now, had come into your house and taken away all your DVDs, but he'd left you with a credit to buy groceries with the money he'd spent on the DVDs. You might feel understandably a little disgruntled about this. So at that point, those people say to themselves, I wonder if there's a better way to get DVDs. I did download that movie. I wonder if I just went to Google, where of course I paid for these movies, but I went to the other part of Google and I typed in download Star Trek movie, what would come up? And those people discover that if you buy movies, you get ripped off, but if you steal movies, you get to own them forever. And so those people stop being customers. So DRM uninvents the customer. Now there's another kind of information restriction, and that's something, of course, all of you know about if you are expatriates or locals here living in China, which is the Great Firewall of China, which I spent a lot of time worrying about before I came out. How, the internet is my outboard brain. How would I function without it? I was going to run up against its limits, and I'd be pitting my puny Linux systems administration tools against the greatest engineering minds that the party can muster. They are nigh omnipotent. If you upset them, they can have you jailed and then executed and cut up for organs and given to party members. I mean, this is. If they can motivate engineers with that force, what hope did I have of ever looking at Flickr again? As you know, once you get the food coloring in the swimming pool, it's very hard to get out again. And even the greatest engineering minds that the party can bring to bear have been largely ineffective at it. You could, in fact, get rid of the bad search results on the internet. All you need to do is take away everyone's computer. But most governments are unwilling to do this because even if they think that they're headed for an information economy, they understand that if you take away everyone's computer, it's going to be bad for your short-term competitiveness. So, and they're not the only ones. I mean, the party are hardly alone in making this mistake and continuing to bash their heads against it. I mean, Paris Hilton found out the hard way that once the video is out there, you can't bring the video back. The King of Thailand learned this. Even the Science Fiction Writers of America, who you'd think would be a very forward-looking gang of people. You know, I'm a member, a former director of the Science Fiction Writers of America. It was founded by one of my mentors, a great writer named Damon Knight, and I pay my dues every year. They just sent a takedown notice to a site called Scribd. Scribd is a site that's like Flickr for text. You can upload any text file you want, and they host bazillions of text files. And if you want to get a text file taken offline because it infringes your copyright, you go through a process called a DMCA takedown notice. And you can use these no matter where you are, but it's an American law. Actually, this law, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, came about as the result of a treaty, and that treaty is called the WIPO Copyright Treaty, and it's in effect all over the world. So most countries have a similar set of rules for taking down infringing materials. And so all you need to do to get your material taken down from Scribd is you send them a letter saying, I swear on penalty of perjury that this file at this URL is my copyrighted work, and I want you to remove it. So notably, what you don't have to do is you don't have to go to a judge, and you don't have to present any evidence, and you don't have to hire a lawyer. All you need to do is send them a takedown notice. And if it turns out that your takedown notice is sent in error, generally speaking, the penalties have been very low. That's changed a little recently. Diebold got fined $125,000 for sending takedown notices, averring that a leaked memo from Diebold showing how they systematically use their voting machines as part of a fraudulent felony voter fraud in America. They said that this was a copyright infringement. They didn't say it wasn't true, but they said the memo infringed on their copyright, and they were fined $125,000 for that. Other people have been fined or have had to withdraw their complaints recently, and there are some lawsuits pending. But by and large, the penalties have been very low. Now contrast that with, you know, all these books here. If it turned out that this book infringed on my copyright, if James Patterson had quoted more of my book than constituted fair use, and I wanted to get this book removed from this bookstore, I couldn't show up and say, I'm Cory Doctorow, I'd like to show you a passage out of this book that infringes on my copyright, and I'd like you to take this book off your shelf right now. I couldn't go to the publisher's office and do it. I would have to go to a court, and I would have to get an injunction, and I would have to have that court serve that injunction here, and it would be expensive and tiresome and difficult. Now, Scribd were pretty good actors about this, although not good enough for the Science Fiction Writers of America and other people. If you sent them a letter and you said it didn't have to comply with the whole DMCA takedown notice regime, but it would have to be formatted more or less like one. You'd have to send them a letter saying, this file is mine, take it down. And that wasn't good enough for the Science Fiction Writers of America, who think would be very forward-looking, but aren't very forward-looking by and large, or at least the people who are running it, the president and vice president, aren't. Now, to be fair, they ran unopposed in the last election. It's one of those organizations that's run entirely by volunteers, and we often get the kind of government we deserve. But they thought it wasn't good enough for them. They thought that Scribd was being a bad actor because they had failed to take affirmative steps to prevent infringing material from showing up, which, as far as I could tell, meant that Scribd should figure out what all the copyrighted in the works in the world were, and then search for them all the time on their database and make sure that none of them were there. Or at least all the copyrighted works that had been created by Science Fiction Writers of America members, tens of thousands of them. This is impractical. It's impractical. Compiling that database is impractical. Policing that database is very impractical because, of course, if you changed a few sentences on the web page, it would disappear. And after the storm happened, there were a lot of claims that they could have been better. They could have done things like put up a text field where the people who submitted the files could put in it the author of the file. And so if you were ripping off Cory Doctorow, you could write Cory Doctorow in the field, and then I could go and find all the Cory Doctorow files and have them taken down. But of course, if that's all it takes, if all it takes to engage in piracy without getting caught is to not fill in that field accurately, then they wouldn't fill in that field accurately. As my friend John McDade said, you can imagine that the theoretical discussion among the pirates, right? Our mateys, we'd best be turning back, there be text fields ahead. this is an ineffective means of preventing piracy. The Science Fiction Writers of America, they had a long, ongoing correspondence with Scripty, and Scripty said, we need you to tell us which files you want taken down. We'll take them down. You just tell us which ones. So they did a search, and they said, we're going to search for all. We've had permission from Robert Silverberg, who's a friend of mine, a great writer, and the Isaac Asimov estate to police their copyrights for them. We're going to list every file that you have on your website that contain the words Isaac Asimov or Robert Silverberg, and we'll send you those. So not Isaac Asimov, Asimov and Silverberg. So I have a Creative Commons licensed novel, Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, that was hosted there. Some fan of mine had put it there. He's allowed to do it. Not a copyright infringement. That file includes a very kind blurb, a review from the former editor of Asimov's science fiction magazine, a guy named Gardner Dozois. It has the word Asimov in it. So that file was listed as one of the files they couldn't take down, as were literally dozens, if not hundreds, of other files. Now, SFWA has got caught sending this bad takedown notice. Included in the takedown notice were things like a junior high teacher's list of 300 great science fiction novels that you can show to kids to get them excited about science fiction. And he wrote to me and he said, I didn't know that it was against the rules to tell people about science fiction novels by name. I guess I should stop. He wasn't being sarcastic. He just doesn't know anything about copyright. No one knows anything about copyright. It's an industrial regulation practiced by white shoe lawyers working for giant, IP firms around the world. And, it makes sense for a lawyer at Universal to call a lawyer at Warner's and say, well, we're planning an unauthorized Harry Potter joke book. Let's talk about whether or not it's fair use. What doesn't make any sense is for like a 12-year-old in Brighton to call up a lawyer at Warner's and say, well, I've put some Harry Potter fan fiction on my website. Is it fair use or isn't it? Those people can't negotiate these rules. It's like having to go to the Security Exchange Commission every time you want to buy a friend lunch and file a Sarbanes-Oxley report about this disbursement. It doesn't make any sense, and it never will make any sense. And anyone who says, well, all we need to do to solve this problem is educate people about copyright is crazy. If we have to educate people about copyright in order to save our industry is doomed, because we're not going to educate people about copyright. To be educated about copyright, you need at least a law degree and probably a little more, by and large. Pam Samuelson, arguably the world's greatest copyright scholar, for whom the Samuelson Clinic at UC Berkeley and George Washington University is named, just published a paper called Preliminary Thoughts on Copyright Reform, in which she points out that the American copyright statute, 17 U.S.C., has been revised 11 times since it was adopted in 1976, is more than 200 pages long, and arguably no one in the world, including lawyers, judges, and law students, or law school teachers, understand it. Right? No one understands the American copyright statute. Literally, no one. 11 patches later, that code is so crufty that no one will ever unpick it. It's time to scrap it and start anew. So the point, though, of this story is that the Science Fiction Writers of America, in their post-mortem statement by the president of the Science Fiction Writers of America, said, we still believe that we need to stand up for the rights of the author, and the fundamental thing that an author needs to be able to do is control copying of his works. And today, it is much easier to commit piracy than it is to take works down. Well, it's pretty easy to take works down. I don't know how much easier it can get, right? If all you need to do to take works down is call up the ISP and say, it's mine, take it down. The next step, as far as I can tell, is the giant database of everything that might be copyrighted, policed 1 million times a day against every database that hosts material to see if it's infringing and remove it immediately. And I don't think that's coming. So another example of taking the food coloring out of the pool, that those of you who are from diaspora populations, which by definition, if you're either Chinese or you're an expat living in China, you're part of some kind of diaspora, is region coding. And territorial rights have been a staple of the entertainment industry for a long time. It's been one of the ways that they've maximized revenue, and it's exploited natural forms of arbitrage. It was really hard to export things that were sold in one region to another region. For one thing, it required clearing customs, and if you were going to do it in anything more than a kind of hand-to-hand way, eventually a container ship would land somewhere, and someone would go in and go, wait a second, what are these 50,000 Filipino copies of Gone with the Wind doing in America marked not for export? So it was tricky. But today, we inhabit a world where diaspora populations are in instantaneous communication with each other, and not only don't understand, but are unwilling to participate in region coding. And even as this is happening, and of course China and Hong Kong and the Philippines and any place that's a crossroads, we're ground zero for the first region-free players. And a lot of people don't really understand this, but the reason that region-free players exist is that the people who license DVDs, the DVD Forum, when they started their licensing program, didn't leave enough money in the pool to sue people who violated the licensing terms. So you could pop up in Malaysia or Shenzhen or anywhere and do a little startup, sell region-free DVDs, and as soon as they came knocking for the $250,000 a day that they were allowed to fine you according to your contract, you could just disappear again. They never fined you. They just didn't have any enforcement money. Now with DVD CCA, the people who are doing ACS licensing for high-definition DVDs, they've left a lot of money, and apparently they're going to sue people for this. And we'll see how long that lasts, right? Are you really willing, as a diaspora population, to put up with not being able to watch the movies you brought from home, right? Not the movies you stole, the movies you brought from home that you paid for. I think most of us probably aren't going to be willing to do it. And yet, region coding is more and more built into anti-copying systems, which encourages more and more defection and civil disobedience. One example is DVB CPCM, which is the anti-copying stuff in the TV standards for digital TV in parts of Asia, Europe, parts of Latin America, and Australia. This includes something called the authorized domain. And the idea is that if you broadcast a TV show, you can flag it so that only one household is allowed to watch it. Well, what's a household? You know, it seems reasonable at first, but what's a household? Well, a household is whatever, like 10 representatives, European representatives and American representatives of IT, film, and CE companies thought up in a meeting in Brussels 6 months ago that none of you were allowed to attend. And those guys, they put a lot of energy into figuring out how you could have a household that encompassed a summer home and a main home and a minivan that had a seatback DVD that the kids were happy with. But I said, well, how about here's a different household. What about the household where, like, mom and dad live in Manila? They have one daughter who lives in Los Angeles and works as a domestic or an au pair, and they have a son who's a construction worker in Saudi Arabia. And they say, well, that's a corner case, right? It's an edge case. We don't need to plan for that. That's not our middle case, right? It's like, well, this isn't minority. This is world majority, right? The world majorities of households look nothing like summer home, minivan, main house. That's not the world's majority of households. So what they're doing is they're breeding a generation of civil disobedience people, people who see no reason to respect copyright, people who understand it to be ridiculous. And those people are going to be very hard to bring back into the fold, just like my granddad when he discovers that he can't watch the movies that he bought, and so he better go and steal them next time. So this is not to say that copyright is dead. Policeable uses of copyrighted works, that is to say, uses where you can police the copyright without spending more money than you would get if you catch someone who's infringing the copyright, are up. So there are new licensing markets for advertisements, international markets for reuse in advertisements, sync rights for films, and so on. There are people who are discovering this all over the world. You put some stuff up on Flickr, and a publisher you've never heard of contacts you and offers you some money to reprint it in their book. Those people you can police, right? They produce physical artifacts. They have a street address. They aren't some nebulous collective of people like the open source movement. Nor are they like ideologically committed copyright abolitionists like the Pirate Party in Sweden. They are a firm who are incorporated, who have an address that you can actually visit, and those people, if the cost of licensing your copyright is low enough, would rather license it than risk the lawsuit, because of course they're making new copyrighted works too, and it's a little bit of a protection racket. If they can convince everyone to pay them for their copyrighted works, then they get money too. So it's a great deal all around. And there are more policeable uses than ever. But copyright is not the heart and soul of the information economy. What industries benefit from widespread access to IT? Well, you have things like shipping and logistics. One container leaves China every second for America, and there are, of course, more containers leaving for everywhere else in the world from China. That would be literally impossible without IT, without global communications networks, without access to PCs, and so on. For one thing, you'd never get people like Bunny Huang, who's second-generation American-born Chinese, parents are Taiwanese refugees. He's the guy who broke the Xbox, but he's also, that was just a hobby for him. He's a MIT PhD engineer who's just in a little startup called Chumbi. They're manufacturing in Shenzhen. How did he find people in Shenzhen who could manufacture his stuff? Over the internet, right? Everyone in Shenzhen is a participant in the information economy. because there would be no Shenzhen manufacturing sector if, like, a guy with a little startup and $50,000 couldn't source manufacturing in Shenzhen that way. So manufacturing, of course. Publishing. My publisher, Tor Books, does more first novels than they've ever done in the history of publishing. They're not a little boutique publisher who you'd think of as being interested in first novels. They're the largest science fiction publisher in the world. What enables them to do this? Well, it's the fact that their setup costs, their production costs, and their distribution costs are lower than they've ever been. It used to be that the cheapest way to bring a book to market was something like this, a mass market paperback. And the break even for something like this was 50,000 copies. So you couldn't buy a first novel unless you were willing to print 50,000 copies of it. That's a really expensive proposition. There aren't a lot of writers that fit that mold. And certainly you wouldn't take a lot of risks with 50,000 copies. Now, with a hardcover today and new production techniques enabled by IT, you can break even on 4,000 or 5,000 copies. And there are a lot of writers who have that many relatives. Right? So they can take a flyer and they can print dozens of first novels every year. Well, this is great news for publishing. It's great news for new writers. It's certainly downloads of books may or may not end up disrupting publishing, but to say publishing is losing from the internet, losing from the information economy is wrong. Publishing is participating in the information economy not by buying and selling information, but by exploiting IT to make the cost of printing books lower. And there are lots of examples of this. Dave Eggers, you probably know McSweeney's, the hipster publisher, prints in Iceland. Right? Why does he print in Iceland? Because he can print in Iceland. It turns out that's the cheapest, most efficient way for him to do it. You can bet that if he had to do that business by telegram and long-distance line, that he wouldn't be printing in Iceland. Right? The fact that he can send PDFs to Iceland is what makes it possible. I recorded a radio column for the CBC last week in Tokyo, or Yokohama. I didn't actually go into a studio to record it. I had a Plantronics microphone plugged into my Linux laptop, and then I was on the phone with the guy. So I had the phone wedged under my headset with a recording engineer. And I would record a bit, and then I'd email it to him. He was in the studio over there, and he'd go, take that mic and just move it. It's a little hot. Could you move it just up and to the left a little? And then I re-record, and he'd go, that's it. That's sweet. And I was doing multiple takes and sending it to him. He edited it there. 15 minutes later, it was back on my laptop in Yokohama. And we had done this between Toronto and Yokohama. And our cost of doing it, the net communications cost of doing it was zero. We did this for free. So this is a traditional information business, copyright business, a radio station. They weren't buying and selling information to benefit from the information economy. They were using networks to do things that they could never have done before for lower cost than they could ever have imagined. The IT industry, the music industry, all those MySpace bands that sell 500,000 CDs by giving away stuff on MySpace, or the techno brega artists in Brazil who in fact allow people to sell their CDs without paying them any money. Anyone can sell any techno brega CD, and they charge $50 to get into their shows, and they pack 10,000 people into the house every weekend. Right? Artists have always gotten like a 7% royalty from their CDs anyways. And that royalty didn't even start to tick over until you paid back the cost of production, the cost of promotion, and then they still took money out for breakage, and their funny accounting practices meant that you probably didn't see much of what was left over unless you were Keith Richards or Paul McCartney, and making so much money from your shows that the money from your CDs was like one more ivory-handled back scratcher for your giant mansion. So they realized that the money from CDs was never the main source of income for most recording artists. And they just went to town. Yes, there's a breed of recording artist that sits in his studio and releases and never goes on tour, and that guy is probably not happy with this, but there's a whole nother generation of recording artists who love this because it fills their live performances. So those guys are benefiting from it. The IT industry, of course, benefits from it. And one of the great exports of the developing world is engineers. And all businesses that benefit from cheaper communications, cheaper customer acquisition, cheaper coordination, and cheaper travel. When I landed in Los Angeles last year when we moved there, I punched in my zip code and barber shop into Google, and I found a nice barber who never used a computer, who was nevertheless a participant in the information economy because his cost of acquiring me as a customer was zero. Management firms, tour operators, tiny hotels, and restaurants. We found we needed a pregnancy massage in Shanghai last week, and everywhere we went, they said, "Oh, we don't do pregnant ladies." We found the pregnancy massage by Googling. They don't use computers. They didn't have a computerized register. They wrote down everything in paper, but they found customers who never could have found them. They didn't speak English. We didn't speak Chinese. The way that we found this business was by using the internet. They are participants in the information economy. They are beneficiaries of it. every sector of the economy, except for those based on controlling the spread of information, benefit from the information economy. Now this is backwards, right? We spent the last 20 years writing treaties and policy based on the idea that an information economy would benefit primarily businesses that controlled information. And today, we primarily benefit businesses that don't control information with information technology. And that means that those two policies, that policy and that reality are completely out of sync. And moreover, the more policy you write to help people control the spread of information, the worse it is for all the businesses that benefit from the unfettered control of information. When you add copy prevention to a PC, you raise the cost of the PC. When you add copy policing businesses or duties to an ISP, you raise the cost of using the network. You don't stop copying. You don't benefit those people who are hoping to control copying, but you raise the cost of doing business for everyone else. So it ends up harming everyone else. So we are making these national bets. If you open a copy of, I think it was the China Daily that we got in our hotel a couple of weeks ago in Dalian, we opened it up and there was a page sponsored by the Chinese Information Ministry. And it said, and it was all the things China was doing to make it harder to make copies in China, right? Particularly copies of foreign works in China. And they were talking about all the new patents being filed in China and so on. Well, America, when it formed as a nation, spent 100 years pirating the copyrights of every country in the world. There was no copyright for foreigners in America for 100 years. That's how they became a developed nation, right? It makes sense to have copyright if you export copyright, because then people are sending you money. But if you import copyright, it's crazy to give foreigners copyright if you're a developing nation, because all you end up doing is shoveling money off of your shores to some other country for stuff that you could get for free. The fathers of the American Revolution understood this. They weren't going to send America's gold to England, who they just spent 3 years kicking out of the country, fighting tooth and nail, spilling blood across their fields. They were going to send their money home to England. They were going to take Charles Dickens' copyrights and pirate the shit out of them and use the money to fund Mark Twain. Because he was a made-in-Britain guy, or a made-in-America guy. And it wasn't until Mark Twain was selling so much in England that he was infuriated by the pirate editions in England that they started to look into bilateral treaties with England, and that's when it made sense for them. So China and the rest of the world are opting into an information economy vision that makes no sense. And the country that doesn't make that bet, the country that's smart enough to bet against where all the dumb money is going into protecting information, is the country that benefits the most. And we'll see how this goes, and we'll see if China can muster the political will. I have a feeling that China is going to have problems because it not only wants to protect information from being copied because it wants to make America happy, but also because it makes the party happy to control the spread of information. And it may be that China makes the wrong bet and spends 5 or 10 years learning the hard way that you can't take the food coloring out of the swimming pool, but we'll see. So thank you.
And that was Cory Doctorow at the Beijing Bookworm bookstore in Beijing. To see the video I took this clip out of, go to donway.org or link to it through futuresoon.com. It's worth watching because you'll hear a brand new Doctorow story as well as a somewhat good Q&A. The video was shot by Victor Mew. Thanks so much to Cory and Donway for letting me podcast this segment. And if you've liked what you've heard, why don't you tune into Futuresoon Radio more often? Just go to futuresoon.com where you will hear the weekly Science Chaser and great interviews in the weeks ahead. I'm Sterling Ford for Futuresoon Radio.